Good morning. My name is Trisha Ritchie, and I'm the Chief Development Officer here at ACT for Alexandria. First, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Today, we are going to be sharing about ACT's process to engage and listen to the community, to identify strategic priorities, and to create a plan to address what we found were Alexandria's most pressing challenges. We're going to be hearing today from ACT President and CEO Heather Peeler, as well as guest speaker Maureen Devine-All, who is ACT's board chair and also a member of the Community Listening and Strategic Planning team. Before we begin, we have a couple of housekeeping reminders. First, some reminders about the functionality of Zoom. For best viewing, we definitely recommend setting your display to speaker view, and that can be found in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And should you need closed captioning, there is an option at the bottom of your screen. There's a button that says CC, where you can access closed captions. And then at the bottom of the screen, you'll also see that there is a Q&A and a chat button. We will have both live. So if you have questions for our speakers, we definitely encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A feature, and we will pass those questions along. And then we also invite you to share your thoughts and your comments through the chat feature, which is also there at the bottom of your screen. So we are actually going to get started with using the chat feature. And I have a question for you, an icebreaker, and that is what makes community a community? So we actually asked this question last night at an event that we had, and we had some really good answers. We had some people speak to neighbors, helping neighbors. We had others who talked about the rich diversity of Alexandria, and then we had others talk about the small town feel. So please, in the comments section in the chat, please let us know what your thoughts are. Oh, I see Susan said people caring about each other. Kate said a sense of connectedness among its residents. Karen said a bond between people. Oh goodness, they're all coming in so fast I can hardly read them. Oh, this is excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. People connecting with each other socially and through business, people working with and for each other for the betterment of everyone. Lynn says people treating each other like family regardless of their bloodlines. Proximity and mutuality, sharing with others and being willingness to receive or being willing to receive. Oh, accessible services for everyone. People who know each other, respect for everyone. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I encourage you to continue to let us know. And in the meantime, I am going to introduce our first speaker, who is Maureen Devine-All. She is, as I mentioned before, the chair of the ACT's board, and she also served on the Community Listening and Strategic Planning team. She came to ACT as a senior consultant with the OR group, and thankfully we convinced her to join our board, and we have greatly benefited from her perspective and expertise since. Maureen is a founder and principal of Candor & Company, which is a coaching and consulting firm for change makers. And she's also director of programs and community impact for Dog Tag, which is a nonprofit and a bakery that works to transition veterans and their families. And if that was all not impressive enough, Maureen is also a published author. Maureen, we are incredibly thankful that you have been leading the board through this exciting time, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, Tricia, thanks so much for that tremendously kind introduction. And we just hit 50 people in the room. So I want to just start with tremendous gratitude. You know, it's not often at 8:35 on a Thursday that you can get 50 people together to talk about what is community, what is change in our community, what is bettering our community look like. So it's a tremendous, tremendous privilege for me to be a part of this organization, a part of this group, and a part of the number just keeps going up, 52 people who we have joining us here this morning to learn a little bit about what we've been working on at ACT. Um, I just want to extend my thanks to everybody who's here in the room, and recognition that everybody here in the room is also part of our larger ACT family, if you want to call us that, or community, all the beautiful ways that you all just described community in the chat fall, I think is what they call that when they all come in like that. Past and current board members in the room, donors, fund holders, partners in the business community, local government and nonprofit community. Those are all the people that it takes to do what we do. All of those partnerships, all of that support, all of you showing up to things like this to learn more and figure out how you can be a part of things and contribute. That is what makes a community foundation, and it's why I'm incredibly proud to be a part of this, because I think it's what makes a difference in our local community and especially in our nonprofit communities, which will always have a place in my heart. So deepest thanks to all of you for everything you've done to get ACT to where it is today. And then a thanks in advance for everything that you will do to support us moving forward, as we're going to share a little bit about what we envision today. So as Tricia mentioned, I did serve on the listening and planning team for this strategic planning process. But I'm really proud to say that it wasn't, a bunch of board members sitting around navel gazing. Very strategically, there were actually only 2 board members on the planning team. And the rest of the committee, we reached out and recruited from around the community. So we had other nonprofit leaders in the room, other sort of philanthropists, community leaders, and government leaders represented. And then something I'm really proud of is we just had community members from different parts of our community, maybe that many of us don't get to hear from very often, right? And so we really, I tried to play a pretty silent role, not silent, but the quiet role on that committee, so that really the folks that we don't get to hear from often got to do a lot of talking and give us a lot of input. So we worked with consultants in this process, and they told us time and time again that they were really impressed just how much we said we want this to be a community-based experience, and then we followed through with that, right? It wasn't just lip service that we invited some community members, but then they really didn't get to contribute to the process. From the consultants' perspective, we were potentially the most devoted client that they've ever had to sort of turning this process over to the community, raising up their voices, and all trying to rally around what we were hearing from them that are the biggest challenges in our community. So since that group made their recommendations, the board has worked hard to say, all right, those are the recommendations. How do we marry those with what ACT actually has the capacity to have impact on? And so I'm excited for Heather to share with you today how that vision is starting to shape up. So I think that's me. And again, super excited to be here, super excited to be heading into my second year as board chair at ACT, where we go kind of from planning to implementation. And I'm excited to be a part of that process, and excited that we have a super strong board leading that process right now too. So without further ado, I think I have keyed us up, and I hope I've whetted your appetite for all the exciting things Heather has to share with us. But super thrilled and very privileged to introduce Heather Peeler, the president and CEO of ACT for Alexandria.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for that introduction, Maureen. And thank you for your commitment and service to ACT and to our community. We really appreciate it. I also wanted to extend my great appreciation for everybody joining us this morning. A strategic planning process has been many, many months in the making, and I'd say it's still to some degree evolving. Every conversation I have with somebody about our strategic direction, I garner a new insight, a new thought, a new idea that I think makes the plan even stronger and deepens our commitment to moving it forward. So I just also want to encourage you. We definitely see this as a dialogue. Please enter your comments, reactions, thoughts in the chat, post questions in the Q&A. We definitely want to hear from you. And so one of the things I want to start with this morning in terms of introducing our new strategic direction to you is with our vision. And this vision statement was crafted by the community listening and strategic planning team that Maureen referenced. And I find this vision statement incredibly inspiring. And you see it here on the screen that Alexandria is a just, vibrant, equitable place where all who live and work here thrive and feel like they belong. And expanding that vision, not just to residents, but to everybody in our community who we see in the restaurants and the shops. They are just as much of a part of our community as folks who live in Alexandria, as well as that sense of belonging was something that was really important to our planning team, and I think has been a huge source of inspiration for us as staff. Our board also worked on revisiting our mission statement. And so we revised our mission statement as follows: to amplify the work of our community by bringing people and resources together. And I hope you feel that this statement encapsulates what ACT means to you and what ACT does for our community, serving as that point of connection and really uplifting the tremendous work that is happening all across Alexandria. Our work was also driven by a set of beliefs, and I'm not going to read them all here, but just wanted to kind of highlight what I think is the sentiment behind many of these beliefs. And that is that we have a tremendous source of strength, and we have tremendous assets that we are building on in our work as an organization. Our history, with all of its complexity, the diversity of our community, the generosity of our community, and the phenomenal partners we have. All of this is what gives us the foundation and I think optimism that we know we will be able to together make Alexandria that just, vibrant, equitable place where all who live here, all who live and work here thrive and feel like they belong. But when we began our work on our strategic plan, we were very much in a transition moment, I think, for us as an organization and I think our community and, quite frankly, our nation. Coming out of the pandemic, the pandemic was a time of a lot of uncertainty, but also reaffirmed our strength as a community. As an organization during the pandemic, ACT stretched and pivoted in new ways to respond to the needs of our community beyond what we may even have thought possible just a few years ago. And so that it's a newfound impact and expansion was something that we really wanted to reflect upon, especially as we consider the context for our current times. Unfortunately, although the pandemic saw an outpouring of support at the federal level, state level, and personally through individual and corporate philanthropy, many of those resources have been pulled back, and we're seeing some declines in some of the community outcomes where we made so much progress during the pandemic. During the pandemic, thanks to a great deal of federal support, we saw a drop in the child poverty rate, but since then, we've seen the child poverty rate increase. We're also hearing from our nonprofit partners significant increases in demands for services that go back to pandemic levels, whether it's for the need for housing and shelter, rental assistance, food assistance. Across almost every indicator we're seeing, in every issue area, we're seeing increased demand for services, and it is putting, I think, a significant strain on our community partners and the organizations that are working so hard to fulfill the needs of our community. We also have the context of our current demographics as a community. As I mentioned earlier, the diversity of Alexandria is an incredible strength and is actually, I think, one of the reasons why so many of us are drawn to Alexandria. Um, but that with that diversity, unfortunately, there is also significant disparity. So as you can see here on the screen, there's the breakdown of median income by race and ethnicity. White households, the median income is almost double of that, what it is for Black and African American households, as well as Hispanic and Latino households. We see that the cost to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Alexandria is $77,000, and this is determined by the housing office, and it is significantly above what's affordable for many of our neighbors. So while we have, again, this amazing, incredible diversity, it is really hard for so many Alexandrians to afford to live here, including to afford the basics like housing. In terms of other demographics, this also comes from the housing office. Just the diversity and the richness of our community also extends to the languages that people speak. So almost a third of Alexandrians speak a language other than English when they're at home. About 25%, a quarter of Alexandrians are foreign born. And then I think what is also really interesting is that about 20% of our households have have a household member that is older than 65, and the same number have households have a household member that is a child under 18. And again, I think that that richness, that diversity really speaks to the strength, but also it poses some challenges where we see here that 37% of our workforce is employed in a service-related industry, again, making it really difficult for them to afford the cost of living here in Alexandria. And so it's with this context and this background that we embarked on a strategic planning process. And coming out of the pandemic and thinking about the current context for our community, we had two questions that were driving us. First, what are the issues that matter most to Alexandrians? And second, how can ACT make a difference? And so, as Maureen mentioned, we wanted to approach the strategic planning process in a different way. We didn't want this to be a closed process where it was just board and staff and maybe a handful of other partners shaping our strategy. We really wanted to be as open as possible and invite perspectives and voices that maybe haven't been part of ACT's work in the past to be part of this process. And so we established the community listening and strategic planning team. It was an 18-member team. And as Maureen said, it represented a true cross-section of our community. So it included board members, it included a few ACT donors. It also included some of our nonprofit partners, but it also included residents, and specifically residents with lived experience with many of the issues that I just mentioned and discussed. The planning team was guided by consultants who enabled us to host focus groups, conduct surveys. We heard from almost 250 people in Alexandria about their thoughts and perspectives about, again, what are the most important issues and what could ACT do to address them. The planning team presented, did all the analysis, and presented a set to our board, and that strategic direction was approved this past May. I want to share some of the highlights about what we heard from the surveys as well as from the focus groups. And so this slide shares a few comments that we heard in response to the question about what is most important. And as you can see, what is most important to people is actually being able to afford to live here. Rental and housing costs emerged as a key issue. Also, the sense of compassion and empathy was really important to the community. I think that ties to that sense of belonging that is a part of our vision for ACT and for Alexandria. People want the resources to be able to pursue their dreams and to live their lives in the way that we all do. We also heard from folks about opportunities they see for ACT to make a difference. So wanting to see a focus on creating more opportunity for youth to contribute their perspectives, for us to focus more on the communities that have the most needs, whether that's on the west side of Alexandria or other neighborhoods. Also, people just wanting to be able to afford the basics in terms of housing and have a living wage. And so compiling all of that data, we came up with a clear theme. The community really wants us to focus on our overall economic well-being, specifically and when it comes to accessing affordable housing, when it comes to economic success and economic mobility, and racial equity. And so what this looks like are four discrete pillars for our work, or four discrete, I guess you could almost call them lines of business. And so I'm going to talk through these at a very high level. And as I'm talking through them, I definitely encourage you to add your perspectives, insights in the chat, or ask a question that we can answer in just a minute. But the four pillars, or the four kind of business lines, if you will, for ACT are as follows. First is the support for giving in Alexandria. This was core to our founding in terms of creating an opportunity for donors and philanthropic people to come together and to pool their resources to have greater impact. And so that commitment to support for giving in Alexandria is going to continue by offering a variety of funds and ways that donors can maximize their giving, their philanthropic goals. Also, Spring for Action is a way that we can facilitate philanthropy across the community, whether you give $5 or $5,000. And then Think Ahead Alexandria is a new-ish initiative that is focused on legacy giving and creating a conversation in our community about how people can leave a lasting legacy to the nonprofit of their choice. Support for nonprofits is another key pillar of our work. And this has, again, been core to ACT's founding. This includes the capacity building grants that we've been known for over the years, the racial equity cohort, and other forms of technical assistance and training that we've offered, as well as Spring to Action, again, that premier event that calls attention to the phenomenal work that the nonprofits of Alexandria are doing day in and day out. We've also established a priority around uplifting and supporting communities. So the community members that were involved in our planning process, we've invited them to continue to be involved in our work through by providing oversight and direction for our Racial Equity Fund. And we've also are now in the third year of our Youth Council, where we've been able to engage high school students in identifying the issues that are most important in Alexandria and in providing them with an opportunity to influence decision makers. And then finally, the work that is most emergent is around support for community well-being. Those are those themes that I just mentioned, and thinking about how we can optimize systems to work for all Alexandrians, providing resources and supports to ensure access to affordable housing, and then story and data telling. So let me pause. Tricia, are there any questions in the that we've surfaced through the chat or in the Q&A?
We do not have any questions as of yet, so I definitely encourage people to use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen to let us know if you have any questions.
Great, terrific. Thank you. Okay, well, let's talk about each of these pillars in a little bit more detail. So support for giving, this is, as I mentioned, has been core to ACT's work since our founding nearly 20 years ago. And it's all about catalyzing the individual passions and generosity of Alexandrians to advance community well-being. So we are committed over the next 3 years to continuing to be that resource and that home for philanthropy in Alexandria by working with donors to help them achieve their philanthropic goals. So we will be offering a variety of philanthropic products from donor advised funds to issue-based funds to funds that support legacy. Also, as I mentioned, Think Ahead Alexandria is a toolkit for nonprofits, but also a resource for donors and individuals to make it easy to think about how they can give from their wealth and have a lasting impact in the community. We will also be engaging philanthropic advisors and others who have an opportunity to influence philanthropy in different ways. And then finally, which I'm really excited about, next year is our 20th anniversary, and we plan to launch a bold campaign that will focus on funding ACT's work and some of the key priorities that we're talking about. Support for nonprofits. Again, I think this is probably another area that is very familiar to folks. And I'd say the theme here is to keep on doing what we've been doing so well. And that's ensuring that Alexandria's nonprofits are strong, that they're high quality, and that they're offering high quality and effective programs to our community. So we will continue to offer Spring to Action, our biggest Alexandria's biggest fundraising event of the year. And we know that is such a critical financial lifeline to so many nonprofit organizations. Also, we will continue to think about ways we can sustain the capacity building grant program at ACT. Over the last few years, we've paused the capacity building grants as we focused more on pandemic response. This past year, we did offer capacity building grants, and we received overwhelming number of requests. We received more than 50 requests for support above and beyond what we had resources for. Those 50 requests totaled to more than, I want to say, 100,000 or close to $1 million, excuse me, in needs that nonprofits identified. Unfortunately, we only had funding available for $125,000, and so we are not able to meet the full need. But our commitment is to find a way to be able to provide capacity building grants year in, year out, so that we can help our nonprofit partners be as strong as possible. The support for community voice, as I mentioned, is a more emergent area of our work, and we were just so inspired by the work that we did through the strategic planning process, and want to continue to find ways to bring community members, and specifically voices who have historically not been at the table for decision making, into our work at ACT. So the Community Advisory Board for the Fund for Racial Equity is a participatory grant process where community members will be defining the priorities, determining the grant process, helping us conduct outreach, and making decisions making grant decisions for those funds. That work is just getting started, and can't wait in the new year to be able to share where we land with that, and what the grant funding opportunities will be. And then the Youth Council. We have I think now 14 high school students that are participating. We'll be announcing the new Youth Council members. The Youth Council every year works to identify two issues that they think are most important to youth in Alexandria. In the spring, we provide a forum for them to present the findings from their research to the mayor, city council, and others, so that their voice can be heard and influence, again, decision-making in Alexandria. So we're really excited about continuing that work. The other pillar, this support for well-being, falls into 3 distinct strategies. And so I'm going to talk about each one of those. And as I mentioned, these are relatively emergent for us, yet they build on our track record of incubating and catalyzing new ideas. So when we think about ACT's work over the past few years, we've been very successful in working with partners to take a spark of an idea, help it gain roots and legs, so to speak, and then have that idea become more permanent in the community. And so examples of that are the Early Care and Education Working Group that is now Kids First Years. Also, the Youth Support Network, which we began during the pandemic, is now in its 3rd year, and we'll be working with our partners to figure out the future home for the Youth Support Network, because ACT is really just serving as that temporary catalyst for that collaboration. We are starting to explore new collaborations. So youth employment is an area where both ACPS, folks at the city, employers, nonprofit providers are really eager to see how we can come together as a community and strengthen that network of support for young people who are looking for an alternative to college. And then finally, exciting news that the City of Alexandria has been selected by the Urban Institute as one of 20 communities around the country to work in partnership with the Urban Institute to create an upward mobility map. So this is where we will be working with the community in partnership again with the City of Alexandria, working with nonprofit organizations to create a roadmap for Alexandrians that can help a family move from financial crisis to stability, from stability to mobility, and mobility to prosperity. This opportunity to create the roadmap, I think, provides a way for us as a community to identify where we have gaps in the system, where we may need to make some investments, and also gives families an opportunity to say what's important to them as they move along that roadmap. Housing access, again, is I think one of the most important, most critical issues, not just in Alexandria, but in our region. And so we know that ACT is not going to be a housing developer where you don't have the resources to finance new housing, but we think we can play a role in supporting access to housing. I will say this is highly emergent for us. We are by no means experts at all. We have great partners here in Alexandria who've been doing this work for decades. So our intent over the next few years is to really learn from them and see where we can provide kind of a value-added difference. What is it that we can do to help accelerate and advance their work, or perhaps fill in some gaps that exist in the system? We also have a few generous donors who've contributed to a housing fund. And so we have some seed funding, and we'll be exploring ways that we can take some small steps towards addressing the housing need from a funding perspective. But this work, I will say, is going to evolve, and with your input, I'm excited about where we can make a difference in terms of shaping access to housing in the future. And then the final element of supporting well-being for our community is around storytelling and data. And this is where many of the partners that we spoke with during the planning process told us that ACT has a unique opportunity, that we are a trusted voice, a trusted partner, and we can help shape dialogue in a way that perhaps others can't by bringing different awareness, helping to create common understanding, helping us to see solutions and opportunities for solutions in ways perhaps we haven't before as a community. We've already been doing this to some degree in our work with the City of Alexandria around ARISE. That's the Guaranteed Income Pilot, where we've served as a communications and community outreach partner. And so we'll continue to do that work. Also, we're thinking about ways we may be able to advocate for other forms of direct cash assistance, whether it's the potential child tax credit that is being discussed at the General Assembly in Virginia this year, or expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit. So looking for different ways that we can help deepen understanding about the critical issues and potential solutions, whether it's through policy levers or through direct service levers. So again, I'm going to pause here and see what questions you have, what questions this is sparking. I know this is a lot of information that we are throwing your way, and we want to hear where you want to go deeper, either this morning or in a conversation throughout the year. So what has piqued your interest, and what would you like to learn more about? So Tricia, do we have any questions in the Q&A?
We did have 2 questions, but I have
Okay.
already answered them. So
Okay.
I don't know if we have further questions. I'm looking at the Q&A as well as the chat. We did get a comment that the upward mobility map sounds really interesting, and we think so too.
Yeah, so the upward mobility map, we think is going to be a powerful tool, not just for nonprofit organizations, but also for families. For nonprofits, so much of our work is can be done in silos, and even though we broke down a lot of those silos and we saw a lot of collaboration during the pandemic, we know there is need for us to I guess, expand our aperture, zoom out, and look at economic mobility from a more expansive way. And so that's what this process is going to enable us to do with expertise from the Urban Institute. So we're super excited about that. So stay tuned. This effort, in terms of the team that's involved, is comprised of folks from the City of Alexandria, ACT, Alive is participating, and Neighborhood Health is also participating. But there's going to be many opportunities for the community to participate. What other questions? Oh, the housing initiative, if we could provide more details. So right now, I would say we are definitely in planning mode. And so this is a great, excuse me, opportunity for influence. So if you have a thought about how we could deploy the resources we do have in a way that will generate the highest impact in our community, we want to hear from you. So don't hesitate to reach out to myself, to Brandy, or any member of the Alexandria team.
We do have a question about who in Alexandria, from a nonprofit perspective, focuses on climate resilience. It seems that several areas that ACT focuses on, like housing, have intersections with climate resilience.
Thank you so much for that question. There is, I think, a lot of intersection with climate resilience, and I'm gonna see if Brandy can add in the chat some specific organizations that are doing work in that area. The City of Alexandria does have a new climate action officer who is working with different agencies across the city to look at that intersection between climate and human services, climate and transportation, climate and housing. So I know it is definitely a priority for our colleagues in the City of Alexandria, and definitely see ways that can become part again of the holistic view when we think about economic well-being for our community.
We have a question. How can new nonprofits find more of a voice with ACT to have visibility in the community?
Great question. So first of all, if you are a new nonprofit, reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We really pride ourselves on trying to be as open and accessible as possible. So send me an email, give us a call. We want to hear from you. Get involved through Spring to Action. That's another great way to elevate your organization to the community. Sign up for our mailing list. We are regularly offering trainings and different forms of technical assistance to support nonprofit organizations, and those are publicized through our nonprofit newsletter. So I think the first step to getting connected is to reach out. We would love to hear from you.
We have a question about how does Alexandria compare to national averages on these needs?
Oh, good question. So I don't have the specific data off the top of my head. Actually, Venice, can you take off the slide so I feel like I can talk to people more one-on-one? Okay, thank you. So in terms of how Alexandria compares to national averages, well, one thing to keep in mind is that our region is much more prosperous compared to other regions around the country. And so, our median income here in Alexandria is over $100,000, which is it was well beyond the median income, I think nationally, as well as in other areas around the country. So we're very fortunate from that perspective. However, we do have the same very significant disparities based on race and ethnicity here in Alexandria that is very similar to what you would see nationally. And then when you drill down and look at Northern Virginia, unfortunately, the city of Alexandria, our outcomes are not as strong as they are in our neighboring communities in Arlington and Fairfax. In fact, this spring, we partnered with Youth Invest Partners and some other funders to host a data summit focused on child outcomes in Northern Virginia. And for many of the outcomes, whether it's economic status, educational attainment, mental health. Unfortunately, young people in Alexandria far worse than do not fare as well as their counterparts in Fairfax, Arlington, or some of the other counties and jurisdictions. So we have a lot of work to do as a community in terms of addressing those disparities.
Heather,
What other questions?
I have a question about that. Just give me a second. So if you could explain why ACT is choosing to bring a focus to youth. We have a participant who would appreciate your answer.
Yeah. Well, we've always historically had a focus on youth. One of the early things partnerships that we embarked on as an organization was working with the City of Alexandria and other community partners to create the Child Advocacy Center, or the CAC as it's known today, to address or to support young people who are experiencing violence and abuse. And so I think from that initial collaboration, we then expanded our work to to focus on early care and education to help young people, children, before they entered school. The Youth Support Network, which is focused on out of school time, kind of picks up the baton from that effort and continuing to have a more in-depth look at ways our community can support young people K through 12. And stay tuned. We're about to publicize a landscape analysis and analysis of parent and youth needs and concerns when it comes to out-of-school time programming. I think that's going to be coming out this Friday or early next week, so stay tuned to that. But that focus on youth has always been a part of ACT's work. I think how we are evolving is recognizing that youth thrive when their communities thrive and when their families thrive. And so that expansion of also focusing on economic well-being is really critical to youth success. And so we see the new strategy as a continuation of that historic focus on youth, but an expansion to be a bit more holistic in thinking about solutions and approaches. I hope that answers the question. If not, feel free to reach out to me directly after.
Okay, we have another question about, have we identified communities and cities around the country that are on the leading edge of bold solutions that we can learn from?
Oh gosh, what a great question. So part of our strategic planning process, we did take a look at other communities around the country that are doing bold work, because we definitely don't believe that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, that places where they have made progress are places that we can learn from and kind of adapt them in an Alexandria way. And so some examples of communities that we reached out to, well, first of all, learning from our partners here in the broader DMV region. So Arlington is doing, and the Arlington Community Foundation are doing amazing work when it comes to housing, affordable housing. Also, our colleagues in Fairfax are also doing great work, and across the DMV. Other communities we looked at, Fairfield, Connecticut was a community that emerged as a place where we can learn from some of their work. They've done a lot of work on economic opportunity, and particularly using storytelling and data to advance solutions in their community. Also, major communities like Evanston, Illinois, Berkeley, California. It's actually pretty broad in terms of the communities that we looked at for inspiration. Also, ACT is part of some national networks, whether it's grant makers for effective organizations or the Council on Foundations, where we're regularly in conversation with our peers and colleagues to post questions, learn from them, and also share some of the great work that we're doing here in Alexandria.
Hey, we have a question about whether we have established certain metrics to track and publish the success of various areas of focus. So whether it's affordable housing or youth employment.
Thank you. That's a great question. And that is the next phase of this work. So in May, when the board approved the strategic direction offered by the planning team, we've spent as a staff the last few months thinking about how do we begin to put that strategy into action. How do we sequence things? What resources are needed? And more specifically, what are some of the specific measurable objectives that we are going to be working towards? So that is the next phase, and getting more specific and having a kind of report card of sorts that we can share with the broader community and internally to help us know more specifically what's the change we're striving for and how do we know if we're on track and making progress. So that is to come, to be continued, and please continue to ask that question because we definitely want to hold ourselves accountable in that way.
Okay, I have another question. How do you gauge ACT's ability to expand into some of the emergent areas and not overstretch or dilute quality?
Oh, that's a really great question, and also a big topic of conversation, as I'm sure you can imagine. We are being very thoughtful in sequencing in how we move forward. So while some may say, oh, affordable housing, so glad to see that as a priority, but it doesn't seem like you're doing a whole lot of activity there. And that's an example of an area where we're trying to be very thoughtful and deliberate about how we move forward in ways that allow us to have the greatest impact so that we are not overstretching, so that we are learning from our partners and colleagues who have a tremendous amount to teach us and inform us about. And how to do it in a way that aligns with resources. So what we didn't share, but we have as a staff, is a more detailed plan that looks literally at the next 3 years. What are we implementing in 2024? How does that relate to 2025 and then 2026? And how are we stair-stepping, if you will, our approach to the emerging areas? We also want to be opportunistic as well. So we know that there are things we probably can't even anticipate. We have worked with the board to create a decision tree that will help us assess new opportunities based on their alignment with our priorities and resources.
Yeah, I have another question. It says, your storytelling and data effort is important. How will you partner with ACPS to share information on our youth? One of the biggest issues we have in the community is a negative narrative about our youth.
That's a good question. So we have been partnering very closely with ACPS in different ways. So through the Youth Support Network, a couple of things that I can highlight and draw attention to there. So for those of you who aren't as familiar, and I've been kind of talking about it and haven't given full detail on all that is involved with the Youth Support Network, this is an effort that was established in 2020 in response to the need to provide more supports to youth during that time when we were all experiencing distance learning. And it has now expanded and includes, I think, almost 80 partners, nonprofit partners, for-profit partners. There's a focus on social and emotional learning, on middle school and program quality. And so we've spent the past year working with the executive team or the executive committee of the Youth Support Network on a landscape scan, and ACPS was an important partner. So in the Equity for All survey that ACPS distributes to students and to families, we included, excuse me, several questions specific to out of school time, needs, wants, desires, perspectives, and so on. In addition, we surveyed providers to understand how much capacity they have, constraints they may have, opportunities they see, and the culmination of all that data and analysis. It also included focus groups and community sessions. All of that data and analysis is going to be released in a report literally momentarily. I'm waiting for the final version of the report this morning. So we are excited to share that, and we'll continue to share that that research and data with the community. So that is one, I think, important resource. Another is, I think, quantitative data is important, but qualitative data, I think, is just as important. And I definitely would encourage everyone to attend the spring gathering, a meeting that we have with the Youth Council, because that's an opportunity to hear directly from youth about their perspectives, about what's going on in the community, the issues that are important to them, and the ways they think our community should be solving and addressing them. And I have to say, it is literally one of my favorite days of the year, because the youth are just so passionate, knowledgeable, energetic, and give me so much hope for what we can do in the future. I mean, they are our future leaders. And so hearing their direct stories, perspectives, ideas, I think is another great way to help kind of shift understanding about kind of data and the perceptions of youth and ACPS in our community. I think we might have time for one more before we shift. Yes.
Okay,
So
so
love all these questions. And if we don't get to all your questions, I really do hope you'll reach out one-on-one. I'd love to hear from you.
there is a lot of mistrust right now concerning the city government and not listening to the concern of residents. How can you work with that issue? And maybe, Heather, maybe you could speak a little bit to how we worked with Arise.
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I'd say the mistrust that many residents feel with the city is complicated and multifaceted. It is, I think, rooted in years of us having systems that unfortunately are grounded in systemic racism. And so there is, I mean, I want to be frank, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to, I think, overcome that. But I do think our colleagues in the city are committed to that, and are very adamant about making sure that city government serves all residents and is there for all people, and that it's as inclusive as possible. So one of the ways in which ACT has been partnering with the city is thinking about how we can be complementary to what the city is doing. So as Tricia mentioned, Arise is a good example. So when the city had the idea of, how might we be able to use federal American Rescue Plan funds to address and support community members who were hardest hit during the pandemic, our response was, well, let's ask community members. So that's where ACT was able to host information sessions, focus groups, and provide that direct line of communication and contact with the city. We also, once the city decided to move forward with Arise, we convened or hired a communications firm to lead focus groups to help shape the application process, how we would promote the program, and all the feedback that we received from the community influenced all the materials, the marketing strategy, everything that was put into place to encourage people to apply to participate in Arise. So that's one example where ACT can be that partner. Another example is with the economic mobility roadmap. The key thing that we're focusing on is around coalition building and community engagement. We know that that process of creating that economic mobility roadmap is not about the nonprofits or city leaders, sitting in a closed room thinking about it, but it is extremely important that residents have an opportunity to influence what that roadmap looks like and what it should be. And so that's another way that we're partnering closely with the city to kind of break down some of those barriers and ensure that residents can fully participate and that their voice is being heard and responded to. So I think that's probably all the time we have right now for questions. And please keep these great questions coming. I, again, can't underscore how important it is for us to hear from you. Every time I have a conversation, again, it just sparks new ideas and challenges us to think about how we can deepen our thinking. Venice, can you show the next slide on the 20th anniversary? So I just want to conclude our session this morning by highlighting that next year is our 20th anniversary. This is going to be an opportunity not just to celebrate ACT and this important milestone, but to celebrate our entire community. So this is another invitation. If you have ideas or thoughts, stories to share from your experience about how ACT has made a difference for you or for your neighbors, please let us know. We would love to be able to include that in our process. If you have thoughts about ways we can celebrate, Alexandria through a grant initiative, through storytelling, through events, we want to hear about that. We intend the celebration process to be as community-wide as possible. And so your involvement, your voice in that is going to be very important. We'll also be undertaking, as I mentioned, a significant fundraising campaign related to our 20th anniversary. We're in the planning stages of that, and I look forward to sharing more about that in the months to come. So I think that is everything that we have time for this morning. Definitely want to encourage everybody to, again, stay in touch with us. We know this new strategy is ambitious. I hope you see your priorities, your concerns reflected in the strategy. And we know we're going to need everybody involved who's been involved in ACT over the years, who's been involved in shaping our strategy, to be with us as we move the strategy forward. So thank you for your time this morning. And I'm just, again, so grateful to be here at ACT and to be in partnership with all of you. And here's more information if you want to reach out to either myself, Trisha, or anybody on the ACT for Alexandria team. Thanks for joining us this morning.